still remember the smell of that mansion the first time I walked through its doors. Old money has a scent, you know. Leather, mahogany, something floral but expensive, and underneath it all, a coldness that no amount of heating can chase away. The Harrington estate sat on 47 acres in Litchfield County, Connecticut, wrapped in October fog so thick you could taste the moisture in your lungs. I was there because Donovan Harrington's plane had vanished from radar 72 hours earlier, and his family wanted answers before the media circus became unmanageable. They called me because I'm discreet. Because I've worked cases involving people whose names appear on Forbes lists, and whose scandals never make it past the first phone call to the right attorney. I'm the detective you hire when you need the truth, but only the version of truth that serves your interests. I knew that walking in. I took the case anyway. The retainer alone could have bought my mortgage twice over. Vivian Harrington met me in the foyer, her hand extended with the kind of calculated warmth that comes from decades of charity galas and board meetings. She was 63 but looked 45, blonde hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to lift her eyebrows. Her eyes were dry. I noted that immediately. 3 days since her husband disappeared over the Atlantic, and not a trace of tears. "Detective Mercer," she said, my name sharp in her mouth like a diagnosis. "Thank you for coming so quickly. I assume you've been briefed on the basics?" I had been. Donovan Harrington, 58, founder and CEO of Apex Diamond Holdings, one of the largest privately owned diamond mining operations in the world, with additional investments in gold extraction across South Africa and Botswana. Net worth estimated at $4.2 billion. His Gulfstream G650 had taken off from Teterboro Airport at 8:47 p.m. on October 14th, headed for London. Somewhere over the Atlantic, roughly 300 miles east of Nova Scotia, the plane simply vanished. No distress signal, no mayday. The transponder went dark, and Donovan Harrington ceased to exist in controlled airspace. "I've read the initial reports," I said. "No wreckage has been found?" "Nothing. The Coast Guard has been searching, but—" She trailed off, gesturing vaguely toward the enormous windows overlooking the grounds. "They say the chances of finding anything after this much time are negligible. And yet you hired me to investigate." Her smile was glacial. "I hired you because my husband was a meticulous man, detective. He didn't simply vanish. Someone made him vanish. I want to know who, and I want to know why." She led me through the house, her heels clicking against marble floors that probably cost more per square foot than most people's cars. The mansion was a monument to wealth, acquired through the earth's suffering. Every diamond chandelier, a reminder that Donovan had built his empire on the backs of miners in countries where labor laws were suggestions and environmental regulations were fiction. I'd done my research. Apex Diamond Holdings had been accused of conflict diamond trading twice in the past decade. Both times, the accusations evaporated under the weight of expensive lawyers and sudden recantations from witnesses who'd clearly been persuaded to remember things differently. "My husband's children are here," Vivian said as we approached a sitting room where I could hear low voices. "From his first marriage. They arrived yesterday." The edge in her tone told me everything about the family dynamics. Donovan had 3 children from his first wife, who died of ovarian cancer 12 years ago. Vivian was the second wife, younger by 15 years, and childless. The inheritance war had probably started the moment Donovan's plane disappeared. The 3 Harrington children looked up as we entered. The oldest, Marcus, stood by the fireplace, 34 years old with his father's sharp jawline, and the kind of tan that comes from ski resorts and yacht decks. Next to him sat Irina, 31, dark-haired and angular, her laptop open on her knees like a shield. The youngest, Zachary, 28, sprawled in an armchair with calculated casualness, wearing a leather jacket despite the warmth of the room. "This is Detective Mercer," Vivian announced. "He'll be conducting a private investigation parallel to the official search." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "A private investigation into what, exactly? My father's plane went down over the ocean. What is there to investigate?" "Your father's business dealings for one," I said evenly. "His recent communications. any threats he might have received. Standard procedure in cases like this. Cases like this, Irina repeated, closing her laptop with a soft click. You mean when wealthy men conveniently disappear before certain financial irregularities come to light? The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Vivian's face remained impassive, but I saw her fingers tighten on her clutch. What financial irregularities? I asked. Irina smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Ask Vivian. Or better yet, ask the forensic accountants who've been crawling through Apex's books for the past 6 months. The SEC doesn't usually take such a keen interest in diamond companies unless something very interesting is happening. That investigation was resolved, Vivian said coldly. Your father cooperated fully. Did he? Zachary spoke for the first time, his voice soft but cutting. Because the timing is fascinating, isn't it? Investigation gets serious. Auditors start asking about the Johannesburg accounts, and suddenly Dad takes an urgent trip to London and never arrives. I filed that away. I'll need to speak with each of you individually, I said, and I'll need access to your father's office, his computers, his personal effects. Whatever you need, Marcus said, but his eyes said something different. They said, find what we want you to find, nothing more. Vivian led me to Donovan's office on the second floor, a vast room dominated by a desk carved from a single piece of African blackwood. The walls were lined with photographs, Donovan shaking hands with presidents, standing in front of mining operations, posing with massive uncut diamonds. In every picture, his smile was the same, confident, proprietary, the smile of a man who owned pieces of the earth. This room is exactly as he left it, Vivian said. I've instructed the staff not to touch anything. I began my examination, pulling on latex gloves, checking drawers, scanning documents. Donovan's calendar showed the London trip had been planned for 3 weeks. There were notes in his handwriting. Finalize Botswana expansion. Meet with DTC representatives. Secure alternative shipping routes. Nothing unusual for a man in his business. But then I found something odd. Buried in a stack of personal correspondence was a handwritten note, dated 2 days before the flight. The handwriting was shaky, hurried. They know about the vault. Move the contents before they find it. Trust no one in the family. What vault? I asked, turning to Vivian. Her face had gone pale. I don't know what you're talking about. She was lying. I could see it in the way her pupils dilated, the way her breathing became deliberately controlled. Mrs. Harrington, if there's something you're not telling me, there's a wine cellar, she said finally, in the basement. Donovan kept his collection there. Perhaps that's what he meant. I didn't believe her, but I let it go for the moment. I'd like to see it. The wine cellar was accessed through the kitchen, down a flight of stone steps that seemed to descend into the house's foundation. The temperature dropped with each step, and the air became heavy with the scent of aged oak and fermentation. The cellar itself was impressive, hundreds of bottles organized by region and vintage, a climate control system that probably cost more than my annual salary, soft lighting that gave everything a warm, amber glow. But it wasn't the wine that caught my attention. It was the door. At the far end of the cellar, partially hidden behind a rack of Bordeaux, was a steel door unlike anything else in the house. Modern, industrial, with a biometric scanner mounted at eye level. The kind of door that belonged in a bank, not a mansion. What's behind that door? I asked. Vivian had followed me down. She stared at the door as if seeing it for the first time. I don't know. Donovan never told me about this. But you knew it was here. I saw him come down here sometimes, late at night. He'd be gone for hours. When I asked, he said he was cataloging his collection. Her voice cracked slightly. I never pushed. In marriages like ours, detective, there are things you don't question. I approached the door, examining the biometric scanner. It was a retinal scanner. Top of the line, probably costing upwards of $50,000. The kind of security you use when you're protecting something more valuable than wine. Do you have access to his medical records? I asked. Recent eye exams? Anything that might have scanned his retina? His physician might, Dr. Castellanos, I can call him. While she made the call, I continued examining the door. There were no visible locks, no keypads, nothing but the retinal scanner. Whatever was behind this door, Donovan had wanted to ensure only he could access it. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. At the base of the door, barely visible in the dim light, was a smear of something dark. I knelt down, pulling a small flashlight from my pocket. The beam illuminated the smear, and I saw it clearly now. Blood. Fresh blood, still slightly tacky to the touch. "Mrs. Harrington," I said quietly, "how recently has anyone been down here?" The staff cleans weekly. The last cleaning was yesterday morning. Yesterday morning, which meant this blood was less than 24 hours old. Which meant it appeared 2 days after Donovan's plane vanished over the Atlantic. "I need you to step back," I said, my mind racing. "Don't touch anything." I took photographs of the blood, swabbed a sample, then turned my attention back to the scanner. On impulse, I examined it more closely with my flashlight. The lens was clean, recently used. And there, on the scanner itself, was a timestamp. October 17th, 2:34 a.m. Yesterday morning, 12 hours after the plane disappeared. The impossible began to crystallize in my mind. Donovan Harrington's plane had vanished at approximately 10 p.m. on October 14th. Yet this scanner, which only responded to his living retina, had been used at 2:34 a.m. on October 17th. Either someone had found a way to fake his biometric signature, nearly impossible with retinal scanners, or Donovan Harrington had been alive and in his mansion basement, while the world believed he was at the bottom of the Atlantic. "I need to get this door open," I said. "Now." It took 3 hours and 2 calls to specialized security companies before we found someone who could override the system without destroying evidence. During that time, I interviewed each of the Harrington children separately. Their alibis were solid but convenient. Marcus had been in Manhattan at a business dinner with 12 witnesses. Irina had been home in Boston. Video calls with colleagues until midnight, proving her location. Zachary had been at a motorcycle rally in Vermont, surrounded by hundreds of people. Too perfect. All of them alibied. All of them with witnesses who could swear to their exact locations when their father's plane disappeared. The security technician finally arrived at 6 p.m. A nervous man named Chen, who kept glancing at Vivienne as if expecting her to change her mind about violating her dead husband's privacy. It took him 40 minutes to bypass the retinal scanner, his laptop connected to the system by a maze of wires, code scrolling across his screen faster than I could follow. "I'm in," he said finally. "But this is strange." "What's strange?" "The system logged an access yesterday at 2:34 a.m., like you said. But according to the biometric signature, it was a perfect match to the primary user's retinal scan. This system is designed to prevent spoofing. If someone had tried to fake it, used a photograph, a contact lens, anything, the system would have rejected it immediately." "Are you saying Donovan Harrington opened this door himself, 2 days after his plane crashed?" Chen's face went pale. "I'm saying the retinal scan was legitimate. I can't explain how." The door opened with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Motion sensors triggered lights as we descended, illuminating walls of reinforced concrete. This wasn't a wine cellar expansion. This was a bunker, built deep beneath the house, hidden from every blueprint, every inspection. At the bottom of the stairs was a room approximately 20 feet square. The walls were lined with safe deposit boxes, the kind you'd find in a Swiss bank. In the center of the room was a desk with a computer, filing cabinets, and stacks of documents. And slumped in the chair behind the desk, wearing the same suit he'd supposedly worn onto his plane 3 days ago, was Donovan Harrington. He was dead. Very dead. The smell confirmed it before my eyes could adjust to the sight. Vivian screamed behind me, and I heard her stumble back up the stairs. But I couldn't look away from the body. There was no visible trauma, no gunshot wound, no stab marks, no signs of struggle. Donovan sat as if he'd simply fallen asleep at his desk, his hands resting on a leather journal, his eyes closed. but his skin had the waxy pallor of death, and when I checked for a pulse, procedure, even though I knew it was pointless, his skin was cold and stiff. Rigor mortis had set in. Medical training told me he'd been dead for at least 12 to 24 hours, which meant he'd died sometime yesterday, October 17th, which meant he'd been alive for 3 full days after his plane disappeared. I called for backup. The real police would need to be involved now, but while I waited, I examined the room. The safe deposit boxes were unlocked, their contents visible. Diamonds. Thousands of them, loose stones in every size and color. This was Donovan's private collection, his personal vault of unregistered stones. Conflict diamonds, probably. Blood diamonds. Stones that couldn't be sold through legitimate channels without triggering international investigations. The computer was password protected, but the journal on the desk was open. I photographed every page before touching it, then carefully lifted it to read Donovan's final entries. The last entry was dated October 17th, 2:0 a.m. They think I'm dead. They think the plane crash will solve everything. But I made it back. I always planned to make it back. The diamonds are secure. The evidence is hidden. Now, I just need to wait until the insurance pays out, until the investigation closes, and then I can disappear properly. New identity, new life. They'll never find me in Mozambique, but I feel strange, dizzy. Did Marcus put something in the whiskey before I left? I thought I was being paranoid, but now I wonder. If I don't make it through the night, if this is poison, then they win. They inherit everything. And they'll never know about this vault, about what I was protecting. God forgive me for what I did to acquire these stones. God forgive me for planning to abandon my family. But they were going to destroy me first. The SEC, the lawsuits, the exposure. I had to disappear. I had to. The entry ended there, the pen trailing off into an illegible scrawl. I sat back, my mind reeling. Donovan had faked his own plane crash. He'd somehow arranged for the plane to disappear. Probably with a pilot he'd paid off. Or maybe he'd never been on the plane at all, using false flight records. He'd hidden in his own vault while the world searched the ocean for his body. He'd planned to wait out the investigation, let his family claim the insurance money, then vanish to Africa with his diamonds. But someone had poisoned him. Someone who knew about his plan. Someone who'd put something in his drink before he descended into the vault. Something slow-acting enough that he'd had time to reach his hiding place, but lethal enough to kill him within hours. The state police arrived within 30 minutes. Crime scene techs swarmed the vault, photographing, swabbing, collecting evidence. The medical examiner confirmed my suspicion. Preliminary exams suggested poisoning, likely something that caused cardiac arrest. Full toxicology would take weeks, but while they worked, I focused on the one question that mattered. Who had access to Donovan's whiskey before he disappeared? I interviewed the household staff. The butler, Edmund, remembered serving Donovan a glass of his preferred bourbon. Pappy Van Winkle, 23-year, in the study at 8 p.m. on October 14th, 30 minutes before he supposedly left for the airport. Edmund had poured it himself, from a bottle kept in the study's locked liquor cabinet. Donovan had been alone in the study, except he hadn't been alone. The security footage, which I'd subpoenaed and reviewed frame by frame, showed Marcus entering the study at 7:45 p.m. He stayed for 7 minutes. When he left, he was carrying his father's used whiskey glass, presumably to dispose of it. But in those 7 minutes, he could have easily swapped drinks or added something to his father's bourbon. Confronted with the footage, Marcus's composure cracked. "He was going to leave us with nothing," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "Do you understand? The SEC investigation was going to expose everything. The conflict diamonds, the money laundering, the offshore accounts. Apex would have been destroyed. Our inheritance would have evaporated into legal fees and settlements. We'd have been left with nothing but his debts and his scandals. So you killed him. I didn't know he was planning to fake his death." Marcus's hands shook. I thought he was actually going to London. I thought the poison would take effect during the flight, that it would look like a heart attack. Clean, tragic. But then the plane disappeared and I thought maybe it had worked differently than I'd planned. That maybe he'd crashed. I didn't know he'd come back. I didn't know about the vault. But you knew about the diamonds. Marcus laughed bitterly. We all knew. Dad wasn't as careful as he thought. Irina had been tracking his finances for months. She found the payments to the offshore accounts, the unexplained shipments from Johannesburg. We knew he had a stockpile somewhere. We just didn't know where. The full picture emerged over the following days. Donovan had planned his disappearance meticulously, arranging for his plane to be sabotaged mid-flight, for the pilot to parachute out with him, for both of them to be retrieved by a chartered boat and returned secretly to Connecticut. The plane, flying on autopilot, had crashed into the Atlantic, leaving no witnesses and triggering a massive insurance payout. But Marcus had anticipated his father's cowardice. He'd poisoned the bourbon using a rare compound derived from a South African plant, oleander mixed with digitalis, that caused cardiac arrest hours after ingestion. By the time Donovan had reached his vault, confident in his escape, the poison was already destroying his heart. Donovan had died alone in his bunker, surrounded by the diamonds he'd valued more than his family, more than his morality. The retinal scanner had captured his final access, his last living moment of freedom before the poison stopped his heart. The vault yielded over $200 million in conflict diamonds. The SEC investigation revealed that Apex Diamond Holdings had been a shell game for years, moving blood diamonds through legitimate channels, bribing officials, exploiting workers. The company collapsed within months. The insurance company refused to pay out once the fraud was revealed. Vivian filed for bankruptcy. Marcus was convicted of first-degree murder. Irina and Zachary were charged with conspiracy. They'd known about Marcus's plan, had helped cover his tracks. All 3 children went to prison. I collected my fee and closed my file. But some nights, I still think about that vault, about Donovan Harrington sitting in his fortress of blood and stone, writing his final words as poison ate through his heart. He'd thought he could cheat death, cheat justice, cheat his family. Instead, he'd been undone by the same ruthless calculation he'd used to build his empire. The diamonds were eventually auctioned off, the proceeds going to victims' funds in the African countries where they'd been mined. The mansion was sold to a tech billionaire who tore down the vault and converted it into a home theater. And me. I still take cases from wealthy families who want their secrets kept. I still walk through mansions that smell like old money and fresh lies. I still listen to people who think their wealth makes them untouchable, who think they can buy their way out of consequence. Because that's the paradox, isn't it? The thing that doesn't make sense but always turns out to be true. The more money someone has, the more desperately they'll kill to keep it. So I ask you, if you had discovered that vault, if you had found those diamonds, would you have turned them in? Or would you have understood just for a moment why Donovan Harrington chose stones over family, wealth over morality, hiding over honesty? Would you have made the same choice Marcus made? Murder to preserve an inheritance? Or would you have walked away and let justice find its own path? I still don't know my own answer, and that's what keeps me awake at night. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like for more crime stories, secrets of powerful families, and investigations that no one dares to tell. Until the next case.